Hi, welcome to the introduction of my new study titled Into the Deep. And in this study, we're going to learn how to deepen our faith. And I want to begin with a personal story. It kind of gives us a physical, visual illustration of what it's going to look like for us to go into the deep. Well, my husband Reese and I have 4 kids, and each summer we take a family vacation. And a couple years ago, we went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and it was just like the most amazing trip. Our kids were at the perfect age. We hiked, we saw bears, we did Yellowstone National Park, and Reese really wanted to do a whitewater rafting excursion. Well, I said, okay, well, let me look it up online. So I looked it up online, and I found a real kind of family-friendly one. So we signed up, and we were in Jackson Hole, and we went to the excursion, and we were on the bus. And as we got on the shore, we got there, and I noticed that the river was really wide, and the waves seemed really fast, and it was kind of loud. The water was just roaring, and I thought, ooh, I don't know if this is that family-friendly. And so I get my kids, and they divide us into groups, and they pair us with another family, and they assign us a guide. Well, this guy, Ben, our guide's name was Ben, he kind of strolls over, and he's like, hey guys, I'm Ben. He's real laid back, kind of granola. He has a little mustache that kind of hangs down, and he seemed kind of young. And he started giving us the protocol of what to expect on the ride. And in the middle of his speech, I just kind of kept looking at the river going, I just don't know if this is for us. And so I just kind of raised my hand. I said, Ben, I just hate to interrupt you. I'm so sorry, but has anybody ever died on this? I was like, I've got 4 kids, and it just looks kind of rough, and I thought this was like a level 1, and I kind of started asking him some fear-based questions. I'm like, how experienced are you, and do these rafts tip over, and if they do tip over, I mean, do you just get like sucked under a rock? I was like, I just don't know what to expect. And he just kind of smiled, and he kind of like combed his mustache, and he's like, we got a nervous Nellie on our hands, guys. And I was kind of like, okay. He goes, 1 in every group. And I was like, I don't really need this little lecture, but okay. I was like, I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm a mom. I just want to make sure that everything's okay. And he said, ma'am, I'm going to tell you something. Fear can do 2 things. It's like fire. It can fuel your faith, or it can just burn your whole house down. And he's like, okay, anyway. And then he went back and started doing the thing. And I was like, okay, well, he's a lot really competent, but I'll take him at his word. So I decided to place my faith in him, even though I didn't really know him, and get in the boat. So I go, okay, kids, we're going to do it. They were pleading, like, Mom, please let us do it. I was like, okay, let's do it. So we get our life jackets on, and we get in the boat. We're leaving the shore. I don't know if you guys can see my visual aid, but we're leaving the shore, getting in the boat. Here's Ben, our guide, and I'm kind of like, really wire tight by nature, so I'm in there and I'm just like tense as can be. I'm grabbing onto one of my daughter's legs, I'm grabbing onto Sylvie's ponytail, I've got my foot on there, and I'm like, okay, Ben, go, we're ready. And I was like really trying to be in control. And so immediately we start hitting the little rapids, and here we go, and they're pretty rough, and he starts yelling out commands. He says, turn to the left, paddle to the right, lean forward. And as we started going, I was kind of like, okay, I think we're okay. And I could tell that he was just maneuvering back there, and he really knew what he was doing, and I started to put my trust in the guide. Even though I didn't really know him very well, as we went down the river, I thought, I think he's earning my faith. So I began to relax. And he said, hey guys, we're coming up on a really big rapid. It's a level 4, and it's called the Big Kahuna. So I really need you, the Big Kahuna. He goes, I really need you to listen to what I'm saying. I need you to listen to my commands. I need you to obey me. I'm going to train you on these little ones. So when we get to the big one, and we're going into the deep, we're going to be submerged completely underwater. I need you to really know what I'm saying. And so we all go, okay, so we went down the river, we're listening, and we're going back and forth, and here we come to the Big Kahuna, and you can see we're about to approach it. We're doing what he says, and we go under the water, completely under. This is our boat. You can't even see us. We're submerged into the deep. And when we come out on the other side, our paddles are raised. We were just celebrating. We were just like, ah, we survived. I was so happy. I could have jumped in Ben's lap and just hugged him. I had complete confidence in him. I just literally trusted him because he took me deep. He took us deep into the water, and we survived. We made it. So the rest of the ride, I'm just holding my hands up. I'm not afraid of the bumps anymore. I completely trust him because I'd gone deep with him. And then right after that, he said, okay, guys, we're going to turn the boat around, and I'm going to watch the boat behind us because this is a rookie, and I don't know if this guy will be able to make it in the deep. And sure enough, that boat tipped. True story. We had to perform a rescue. Ben's like, okay, wheels it on a dime. He goes, okay, guys, we're going to rescue these people. We're pulling grown men, children, women into our boat and rescuing them out of the river. And it really occurred to me, it matters who you're in the boat with. It matters who your guide is. It matters who you're going to put your faith in. So when we got to the shore, I was just singing Ben's praises. I was saying, Ben, I will tell all my friends if they do the whitewater rafting trip, I'll recommend you. I was sharing my story because I trust in him. And so in this study, we're going to look at this picture, and we're going to see that Jesus is our guide. And when we put our faith in him, and we get off the shore, and we risk doing life with him, and going on this journey with him, he's going to take us deep. We're going to go through some things. But as we obey his commands, and as we go down this river, we're going to learn that we can trust him, and we won't sink. And when we get to the other shore, we can share our faith, because we're going to know, listen, I've been deep with him. Like, I know him. You can trust him. You can trust him. Your boat won't flip. You won't sink. So in the next 6 weeks, we're going to look at 6 Bible stories of both Old and New Testament men. I'm out of breath. I'm doing all my theatrics. Both Old and New Testament men who went on a faith journey with God. These men left the shore they were on, and they followed God into the deep. And when they reached a new shore, they had newfound faith. Each of their stories include a boat, an invitation, obedience, a voyage, storms and opposition. But they also include miracles. We're going to see God's supernatural provision. We're going to see strength and faith and a new shore. So as I was praying about what to write about in this study, I was in the bathtub one night. That's sort of when God gives me my ideas. I love taking baths, and I'm kind of just sitting down for the first time of the day. And a wooden boat just kind of popped in my head. And I remember when it happened, it was early in the summer. And I thought, I'm just going to look at Bible stories on boats. So, like, I'm a visual learner, and that's sort of how God speaks to me. He'll just give me a picture of something. And so I looked at the stories, and I found 6. And I included them in this study. And so we're going to look at these men's stories, and we're going to draw parallels from their stories of faith, and we're going to apply them to our own faith journeys. We're going to see how God takes us deep. We're going to take the faith of the Bible, and we're going to apply it to our everyday reality. So I'm going to give you sort of a brief outline of what to expect in the next 6 weeks. Week 1 is titled The Faith to Build. And we're going to study Noah. And we're going to see what God asked him to build in faith. And we're going to look at what's God asking us to build in faith. And we're going to look week 2, it's titled The Faith to Step Out. And we're going to take an up-close and personal look at the Apostle Peter. And we're going to see how he stepped out of the boat and he joined Jesus walking on water. Where is God asking us to step out of the confines of our comfort, of our fear, of our timidity, and join God in the supernatural? Week 3, we're going to look, it's called The Faith to Lead. And we're going to look at the Apostle Paul. And we're going to see one of his missionary journeys, how he led in faith despite being a prisoner. He went on a journey to Rome, and he was shipwrecked, and there were detours, but he led men in faith to the shore. Where's God asking us to step out and lead? Week 4 is titled The Faith to Trust. And we're going to see the disciples were on a boat in the middle of the lake in a violent storm, but Jesus was asleep on the boat. Where is Jesus asleep? Where does it seem like Jesus is asleep in our storms? And what do we do? How do we reconcile that in our faith? We're going to look at that. Week 5 is titled The Faith to Surrender. And we're going to look at the Old Testament prophet Jonah. And we're going to see how God called him on a faith journey, and he ran from God. And he ended up into the deep in rebellion. Where's God asking us? What area of our life are we running in? What's God asking us to surrender to him in faith and not run from him? Week 6 is the last week, and it's titled The Faith to Follow. And we're going to look again at the Apostle Peter. And we're going to see how Jesus got into his fishing boat, and he says, Peter, push out into the deep, because from now on you will catch men. Where's God asking you to share faith? Where's he asking you to be an influencer for Jesus and share your faith with others? So in this study, we're going to realize that there's a faith journey marked out for you. God has a plan, and he has a part for you to play in his plan. And in the next 6 weeks, God's going to draw you away from some shore and take you deeper. And that will look different for all of us. So if you're here today, it's not by accident. God has somewhere new he wants to take you. And it doesn't matter if you've been a Christian for 30 years or if you're just getting your feet wet and this is your first Bible study. God will always be taking us to deeper places with him. So what is faith? How do we define it? Faith is defined as complete trust or confidence in someone or something. It's placing our lives in the hands of our guide, Jesus. Faith is different from just believing God exists. It's different from believing in an impersonal God. And faith is different from religion. It's different from tradition. Faith is different from even just going to church. Faith is placing your hope and your confidence in Jesus Christ. It is surrendering your life to him. It's asking him to save you and trusting that he will. Faith is believing that the promises in the Bible were meant for you. Faith is believing that God has plans, divine plans for your life, in your neighborhood, in your sphere of influence. And when you follow him, he will do extraordinary things through you by faith. It's believing even when you don't see. And the Bible says it like this in Hebrews 1:11. Faith is the confidence in what we hope for, and it is the assurance of what we do not see. It's what marks believers. What I love about the Bible is it's just ordinary men and women. They didn't have it all together. They weren't perfect. And God made them extraordinary. He set them apart by their faith. In Hebrews chapter 11, God gives us a list of Old Testament patriarchs that were marked by faith. I'm going to read them to you. By faith, Abel brought a better gift offering than Cain. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark. By faith, Abraham, when called to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, he obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. By faith, Sarah, who was way past childbearing age, was unable to bear children. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months, unafraid of the king's edict. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. By faith, the prostitute Rahab welcomed spies. Verse 13 says all of these people were still living by faith when they died. It wasn't a one-time decision. It was a lifestyle. They walked by faith and not by sight. And I love this part in verse 32. The Bible says, how much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. Listen what they did by faith. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms. They ruled with justice. They received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions. They quenched the flames of fire. They escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weaknesses were turned into strength. That's what happens when we place our faith in God. Our weaknesses are turned into strength. This is the kind of faith Jesus died to give us. This is the kind of faith that God says, I approve this. This is what you'll do when you place your faith in me. We'll see God's power at work in our everyday lives. So today we're going to look at the Old Testament patriarch Moses. We're going to examine parts of his faith walk. And we're going to see how God takes him into deeper places of faith. And we're going to apply that to our lives. So a little history on Moses in Exodus 1-3. Moses was a Hebrew baby. He was born in a generation of Israelites under Egyptian rule. The Egyptian Pharaoh, the ruler, was threatened by the number of Israelites. So he sent an edict into all the land. And he said, kill all the male Hebrew babies. Throw them in the Nile River. Moses' parents did not obey this. By faith, they placed Moses in a basket, put him on the Nile River, on the shore, praying that God would spare his life. Through a series of divine events, Pharaoh's daughter was bathing, and she saw the baby, she had favor on him. And she took Moses into her home and raised him in the Egyptian culture as her own son. In Exodus 2:10, it says she named him Moses, for she explained, I drew him out of the water. The name Moses, translated in Hebrew, is Moshe, and it means to draw out of the water. The words draw out caught my attention because they beautifully describe how the going deep with God process begins. God draws us to himself. He calls us into relationship. In John 12:32, Jesus said, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. Everyone is invited into relationship. The Greek word draw is helkuo, and it means to drag, to pull, to be drawn by an inward power. There is a void in all of mankind that can only be filled with the Spirit of God. It's how we're made. And when we respond to that call, we invite Jesus in, his Spirit fills us. Nothing else can fill that void but his Spirit. We are joined to him. We are saved. We will spend eternity in heaven. This is salvation. And this is where the journey begins. This is only the beginning. So let's see how God calls Moses into a life of faith. He called him out of his culture. Moses was raised as royalty in the Egyptian culture. He would have been raised in a world of power, fame, pleasure, education, luxury. He would have been worshiping the Egyptian gods. But we see the gods began to draw him out at the age of 40. Hebrews 11:24 says, by faith, when Moses had grown up, he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He was being drawn by God towards the God of Israel. He was drawn away from the Egyptian life and away from the Egyptian gods. And it really didn't make any sense because he became a slave. He left the world that he knew. Sometimes faith doesn't make sense. It won't make sense to anyone else, and it won't even make sense to us. But we're compelled to follow God. We don't even know why. We're just compelled. God made us this way. He's pursuing you. So Moses became a slave. In Exodus 2:11, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and Moses killed the Egyptian. Pharaoh got wind of this and wanted him dead. So Moses fled to a land called Midian. Midian was not under Egyptian rule. It was 285 miles away from Egypt. So Moses would have been safe in Midian, safe from Pharaoh. He got married there. He became a shepherd. He had children, and he was living a comfortable life. And then we see God calling him again, this time into his presence. In Exodus 3:1-5, one day it says, when Moses was tending a flock of sheep in the wilderness, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire in the middle of the bush. Moses was amazed at this sight because the bush was on fire, but it didn't burn up. So he was drawn to it. And God said, Moses, Moses, here I am. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. He revealed himself to Moses when Moses entered his presence. God said, I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face. He was afraid to look at God. God said, I am the great I am. I'm the present tense God, and I am with you. Then God calls Moses again, and this time it's into an assignment. He says, look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me. I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. God calls us into assignments. There are things in the faith he's going to ask you to do, and you cannot do it in your own strength. It will require faith, and God will empower you. Moses is wrestling with insecurity. We see his humanity. He says, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I that you're going to send me? And God says, I will be with you. But Moses protested again. He says, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me? What if they say, the Lord's never appeared to you? And then he says, Lord, you know I'm not good with words. I get tongue-tied. And I love how God calls him out of his insecurity. He says, Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or not speak, hear or not hear, see or not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. If God calls you, he will equip you. He will give you what you need. Well, Moses obeys despite his feelings. In Exodus 4:20, it says Moses took his wife's sons, and he put him on a donkey, and they headed to Egypt. So the first point, if you're taking notes, God takes us deep when we respond to his call. God called him out of his culture, and he responded. God called him out of into his presence, and he responded. God called him into an assignment, and he responded. God called him out of insecurity, and he responded. God's going to call us over and over in this life. He's going to call us into relationship. He's going to call us into assignments. And the more we respond, the deeper we go. So now Moses is putting his faith in action, and this is the hard part. He's going to go on this faith journey with God. In Exodus 5:1, Moses sent his brother Aaron with him. God sent his brother Aaron with him. So it says, they appeared before Pharaoh. And they said, Pharaoh, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go. And listen to Pharaoh's response. He says, is that so? And who is the Lord? And why should I listen to him and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord. I will not let them go. And that same day, they persisted. In that same day, Pharaoh sent this order to the Egyptian slave drivers. He said, do not supply any more straw for making bricks. Make the people get it themselves. Load them down with more work. So things got worse. Things got worse before they got better. And this can often happen when we start walking in obedience because we have an enemy who's going to come against us. So many of you, how does this apply to us? Maybe God's calling you to work on your marriage. Maybe you're having some marital problems and you start going to counseling and you're trying to be obedient. You feel like God's called you to it, but you go to counseling and it's bringing up all these issues and things get worse before they get better. And you're going, Lord, why'd you tell me? I'm trying to obey. What's happening? Why'd you tell me to do this? Or maybe you're trying to get out of debt and you're being really disciplined with your finances. And your washer breaks and your refrigerator leaks and your dryer goes out in the same week and you're going, Lord, what are you doing? I'm trying to obey you. But opposition's coming against you. Let's see how Moses handled it. Right out of the gate, Pharaoh pretty much laughs in his face. So Moses went back to the Lord and he protested, why have you brought all this trouble on your own people, Lord? Why did you even send me? Moses takes his concerns, his frustrations, and his questions to God. This is a model for how we handle opposition. We go to God. And God responds to Moses by reminding him of his promise. He says, Moses, you say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will free you from your oppression, and I will rescue you from the slavery in Egypt. He's saying, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, but there's going to be a process. It's not going to be in your timeline. It's not going to look like you think. You're not going to have it all figured out. You're going to have to walk by faith, and you're going to have to trust me in the process. You're going to have to obey, even when you don't see. So Moses obeyed, and we're going to see in Exodus chapter 6 through 13, this back and forth communicating between God and Moses. Moses goes to God. God gives him the message. Moses goes to Pharaoh. Pharaoh rejects it. God performs a sign and a wonder through Moses. So step by step by step, Moses is being obedient in the process, even when he doesn't fully understand, but he's seeing God's miracles, and he's feeling God's presence, and he's building a relationship with God, and they're building a faith. His faith is growing, but the final thing hasn't occurred yet. Moses goes back and forth, and I counted in this process 26 times the phrase, then the Lord said to Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses. Moses just kept obeying, even when he didn't fully see. And this is where the 10 plagues of Egypt come into play. So in this process, Moses is obedient. And finally, in Exodus 12:31, we see Pharaoh say, go, after the 10th plague, get your people and go. You're free. Leave. And this brings us to our second point. God takes us deep when we remain faithful in the journey. When we remain faithful in the journey. Moses remained faithful in the assignment. And God was true to his word, and God fulfilled his promise. Jesus, in John 15:4 says, remain in me as I remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. God's saying, when you ask me into your heart, when you receive me, when you put your faith in me, I'm in you. I'll never leave you. But you got to remain in me. You got to remain in my presence. You got to remain in my assignments. You got to remain faithful if you want to see my power at work in your life. If you want to bear fruit, you got to remain. Because fruitfulness always follows faithfulness. You won't see the fruit if you don't remain. You got to remain. Remain means stay the course. Keep trusting. Keep praying. Keep obeying, even when you don't see. So now God's going to take Moses even deeper. Now Moses is leading 600,000 men, not including women and children, possibly 1 million people out of Egypt. He's responsible for shepherding these people. But he was ready to lead them. God took him deep. He had been through some things with God. He had a faith worth sharing. He knows God's faithful to his promise. He'd been there with him, so he could share his faith with others. He was ready to go deeper into leadership. So how does this translate for us? Maybe you've experienced deep loss. And in that process of healing, you grew close to the Lord. You met with him daily to survive. In the pain and the heartache and in the loneliness, your faith grew. You met with Jesus consistently. You felt his presence. You felt supernatural peace. You saw his faithfulness even when you were hurting. And you went deep with him. And you proved faithful. And on the other side of that healing, you can help and you can share your faith with somebody else who's going through it. You can say, no, I've been deep with him. I've been there. I know it's hard, but you seek the Lord. You remain in him. You stay. He will provide for you. He will help you. It's why we go deep, so we can take others deep. That's why God has us go deep in faith, so we can help others. We can share our faith. We're going to see this happen with Moses. So God instructed him to go to the shore of the Red Sea. So he has all the Israelites, and they're on the shore. And Pharaoh changes his mind. He says, I want to go after him again. I want him to come back and be my slaves. So here comes Pharaoh's army. So there's a sea in front of him, and an army coming behind him. And listen how the Israelites respond. They cried out to the Lord and to Moses, why did you bring us here to die in the desert? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Their faith was weak. They're on the shore. They're nervous Nellies. They're going, why are we here? I don't want to go in the water. And I'd rather just go back and be a slave. But Moses, he'd been through some things. He doesn't even blink. He encourages them in the faith. He says, don't be afraid. You stand firm and you will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. Moses didn't know how, but he knew God would make a way. He'd seen him do it. He'd seen him do it for months. God told Moses, pick up your staff, raise it over the sea, divide the waters. Moses did what God commanded, and the water divided, and the Israelites walked into the deep on dry land. They walked through the sea. I mean, what a literal picture of going deep. They went from shore to shore. And when they got to the other shore, they had a newfound faith. They were going, oh my goodness, I've been deep. God was faithful. God was faithful. And then God commanded Moses to close the sea over the Egyptians, and they all perished. And it says in verse 31, when the people of Israel saw the mighty power that the Lord had unleashed against the Egyptians, they were filled with awe before him, and they put their faith in him. So the final point for taking notes, God takes us deep when we reach others by sharing our faith. When we reach others. In Matthew 28:19, Jesus said before he ascended into heaven, therefore go, make disciples of all nations, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. See, the disciples went through a 3-year training process with Jesus. They went deep so then they could go and take others deep. They had a faith worth sharing. That's what a disciple is. We're his disciples. So the summary, we go into deeper places of faith when we respond to God's call, when we remain faithful in the journey, and when we reach others for his kingdom by sharing our faith. God will always be calling us away from the shallow and into deeper places of faith. And when I was writing this, I just kept thinking of the song Shallow by Lady Gaga. So I thought I would just, I was like playing in my head. And so I'm going to close reading some of the lyrics of that today. Tell me something, girl. Are you happy in this modern world? Or do you need more? Is there something else you're searching for? Tell me something, boy. Aren't you tired of trying to fill that void? Or do you need more? Ain't it hard keeping it so hardcore? I'm off the deep end. Watch as I dive in. I'll never meet the ground. I'll crash through the surface where they can't hurt us. We're far from the shallow now. And I want us to be able to say to Jesus at the end of this study, Lord, I'm far from the shallow now. Just take me deep. So